Hey everybody, it's Danny from Board Game Sanctuary here, and welcome to my new top 3 video board game series. In this video, we are going to be looking at the top 3 hottest board games that I've been playing this month. Let's get this show on the road. So one of the hottest games that I played this month is Spicy. It's a beautiful, very simple, easy to get into bluffing style card game where you're trying to gain as many cards as possible whilst trying to convince the other players that the cards you're playing face down into the center area are legit. Let's have a look at it. Look at the chilies on this thing. Spicy is a super fun game, and it reminds me of a game called Cockroach Poker, and I like to describe Spicy as a Cockroach Poker 2.0. So if you really like fun bluffing games, this one is definitely one that you should add to your collection, and not to mention the beautiful Southeast Asian art is gorgeous, and this shininess. So basically in a game of Spicy, players are going to have a hand of cards that they're going to essentially try and get rid of. The cards will have one of 3 suits on them, so there's blue pepper, there are red chilies, and there is also green wasabi, which looks like this. And basically, on your turn, you're going to be playing a card face down. Okay, if you're the starting player who's going to start the round off, you need to play a card that's between 1 to 3, and you can lie about that. So I've played a 10, I put it face down, but I could easily say it's a 2 red chili. And basically the next person in play order would then have to play their card, so the next person might put their card down and say it's a 5 red chili. Now, no one's really going to know whether that is a 5 red chili or not. We are going to have to instill some sort of trust in the other players at the table, and this is where the game gets very interesting. The third player might say it's a 7 red chili. Now you keep going until you get to about 10. When you get to 10, a person has to play a card that is 10, and it's now my turn, and I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to play a 10 red chili, and notice how we've been following the red chili suit. Each round needs to follow the same suit, and I've actually played a 6 red chili. So another person at the table might then now come in and interrupt and go, you know what? We don't think that's a 10 red chili. And what they actually have to do is they have to think of which aspect of what I've announced could be a lie. So if they announce that my red chili's a fake and I reveal it, I actually still win this stack of cards because I actually did have a red chili. But if they call my number bluff and say, you know what, we don't think it's a 10, and I reveal the card, then that challenging player actually wins the pile of cards. Now you do take a penalty and you have to draw 2 cards if you lose a challenge, but the main way to actually win this game is to try and challenge as many players as you can and nail it when you're trying to call out their bluff. Now the beauty of this game is that you can get away with lying about any cards that you have. There are 2 cards that feature in the game that really change the game's flavor and tempo. You've got this wild number card that actually functions as all of the numbers from 1 to 10. And you've also got this wild chili card that functions as all 3 chilies in the game, or all 3 spices, I guess you could call it. So if someone calls you on this card and says, you know what, your number 3 isn't really a number 3, and this gets revealed, you still win the challenge because this acts as all of the numbers. However, if someone challenges you on the chili value of this card and they say, you know what, you didn't play a red chili, you played a wasabi, and you reveal this card, then you still lose the stack. And the vice versa happens with the wild chili cards. So now as you play the game and you call out the different number cards, players are going to build up a nice healthy stack of gold cards that appear in front of them, and each gold card that's in front of them functions as an endgame victory point. Now if a player ever empties their hand and is left unchallenged, then they actually acquire a 10-point trophy. And if a player ever acquires 2 of these 10-point trophies, they automatically win the game. If players only have 1 of them and the end of the game is triggered, then this card counts as 10 points on top of their pile of cards that they've already acquired. Man, that tiger is hot. I also wanted to note that Spicy also adds some extra game cards that spices things up and adds some extra long game, longevity, and replayability. Ones that are going to make the game feel fresh each and every time you play it. So another hot game that I played this month is a game called Masterword. Masterword takes the original game Mastermind and wordifies it by turning it into a 20-question style word guessing game that is a little bit more challenging than you might think, but incredibly rewarding in the long run. So what players are essentially doing in the game Masterword is they're going to be trying to guess one of the words that are featured on this card. The seekers will know generally what the topic will be, but only the guide will know what the answer will be, and it's written in this red section down below. So the guide will know that the answer is dragon, but the rest of the guessing players will know that it comes under the umbrella of creature. And the job is for the seekers to try and guess what the mystery word is, or the master word is, in this box. So basically, each seeker who's trying to guess the mystery word is going to take 6 of these blank clue guessing cards. And basically on the round, they'll have 90 seconds to write down a concept on this card and place it in a row. So for example, if it's creature, I might say, is it human-like? You might also say something like, does it fly? Does it have fur? And what the players would do is they would place them all in a row. Move these chilies out of the way. And then the guide would then go through and say, okay, what did you mean by human-like? Just clarify it for me. What did you mean about fly? Explain that. And what did you mean about fur? Once that clarification process has happened, the guide will then look through their tokens and then decide how many of those words relate to the final answer. Now, without identifying which of the clues is linked, they will just put down a number of tokens like this that will indicate how many of these 3 clues are related. And because we know the answer is dragon, fly is probably the only one that relates to it. Dragons don't tend to have fur and they're not human-like. So now the seekers will know that one of these 3 concepts is linked to the final master word. And so on their next round, they're going to have to decide what new concepts they're going to use, or whether they're going to follow this line of inquiry and try and narrow it down. And then once players know or think they know what the answer is, they have 3 attempts to guess it. And basically, instead of placing a clue, a player could write their answer down on the card, and if they match the master word, the players win. However, if players write the master word down on one of their white clue cards, they immediately lose the game. It is a game of deduction, logic, but also thinking conceptually about separating as many of the answers as they can and funneling it and narrowing it down to a select few before being able to deduce what it might be. So the next row of the game might look something like this, and the players here have decided to try and use fly again to see if that was a correct match in the first round. The guide for this round will give them 2 thumbs up. Now, throughout the game, the guide may use one of the thumbs up tokens as a joker, and that means placing it on a card to show what that thumb was referring to, kind of helping the players along a little bit more. What I really love about Masterword, it's a super simple game to get into, it's very easy to teach, and it is definitely family friendly. I really like the strategy that is employed in this game, where you're trying to put down concepts onto cards as the seeker and trying to eliminate as many of the possible answers as you can. So if it's an animal, you might write down the word aquatic or warm-blooded or reptile to try and see if any of those match, and if they do, you're heading on the right path, and if they don't, you've eliminated those groups altogether. And finding the right concepts in this game is really tricky. I also like the logical aspect of this game, so if you've got a couple of ticks from the guide, and in your next round you're trying to work out which of those ticks it could be, using logic to try and deduce what characteristics we put down or as a team or as a group beforehand is going to help you improve your success rate. And when you do succeed in this game, it is an incredibly joyous moment. I really love Masterword at a 2-player level. There's a really cool 2-player variant that you do have to print off the Scorpion Mask publisher website. But basically what it is, it's the same game, except one player is the seeker and they write down the 3 concepts, and one player is the guide, and the guide has to also write down a concept. And if the seeker writes a concept that matches the guide reveals that their concept, saying to the seeker that you are on the right track. Such a beautiful small rule tweak that just makes this game scalable but accessible as well. The third game that I've been playing this month is a really fun area control game that has a very unique and beautiful theme, and it is called Brew. So in Brew, you've got this main village board that is double-sided. You've got the day side and the night side, and each of the spaces on the player board has spaces for you to put particular dice. In these 2 spaces, you can put any type of die, and this allows you to train a creature or gain any ingredient, whereas these 3 dice require you to use special element dice. So using the fire die to remove all element dice from a particular all forest, or using the water die to gather 1 of each ingredient, or using the wind die to gather 1 wild ingredient and reveal and reserve 1 potion. On the other side, the abilities are a little bit different and have different effects, and basically there are 4 rounds or 4 seasons in the game. At the end of each round, the board flips back over. So look at these gorgeous colored player dice. So basically each player gets 4 dice of their color. So basically you got the forage die, and each of the dice has these 3 particular symbols on it, and these symbols are used to claim position or influence over the forests that appear from each round in the game. Each player also receives 2 element dice each, and these have the fire, wind and water symbols on them, which can be used on the board, or they can be used to help manipulate how the forests are claimed, because each of these elements has a different special ability. Each character in the game can be played without their special ability, and this is where you put your trained creatures, and this is the side where you put creatures that you've released into the forest. And creatures that you've released into the forest basically means you don't use their ability anymore, but if you can pair them up with a forest of the same season type, you can gain extra points at the end of the game. And for more advanced players, these characters do have other additional abilities that change the power level and the flow of the game. So across each round of the game, there are forests that players are going to try and fight for and gain control of. The forests have different die spaces that have different symbols that feature on their forage dice, and basically if a player wants to claim a spot on the forest space, they need to place a forage die with a matching symbol, and then they gain that little resource into their supply, which they can use to buy potions later on. And basically what players are going to be doing is they're going to try and fight for these spaces and trying to gain control of them by having the majority of dice placed on there. And if you have the majority of dice placed on there by the end of the round, you end up claiming that card. Now the cards, as you can see, some of them have only 1 color, so this is like a summer card, and this card here in the middle is a autumn and winter card. As you can see, it's split into 2 different colors. Same with this summer winter card. And some cards are worth more than others. This one here is worth 8 victory points at the end of the game. And if you happen to train an animal that is of the same season as it, you can kind of pair them together and gain bonus points this way, an extra 3 points. Now there are different ways that can kind of manipulate the presence of the different forage dice on these cards. First of all, players can use element dice to try and affect some of the placements of the dice in the game area. First of all, a fire die can be used to nullify another person's forage die. A water element can be placed in a forest to gain 2 of that particular resource, and a wind die can be used to exchange itself with a forage die so the player can reuse this die in another area, especially when you can see that that red player probably wasn't going to win ownership of this forest card. Now, if a player wants to place a forage die in a space where the symbol doesn't match, players can play one wild ingredient to force that die into that location, giving players a little bit of additional flexibility. So when you place your dice in the forest or on the main village spaces, you're going to be essentially gaining different combinations of resources which you're going to use to transform them and brew potions. So why exactly do we want to be brewing potions? Well, potions are going to give you game-changing effects that are going to help you manipulate some of the dice on the forest spaces that other players have placed. For example, this potion allows you to change one of your unplaced dice to any face. This one allows you to remove any placed die, and you probably want to use that against another player. This one allows you to re-roll any number of your unplaced dice, hopefully getting you the faces of the dice that you need to win. These potion cards are pretty cool because they give you some surprise actions that help you to change the nature of the game and try and swing it in your favor. Each character in the game can have up to 3 different animals that are trained at any one time, and any animals that they want to cycle out, they can release into the forest and score additional victory points at the end of the game. Now, the animal cards are more specific to the different actions and abilities that you might want to use your dice on that aren't on the main game board or that aren't triggered in the forest cards. For example, this one allows you to place any element die on this card to get 2 wild tokens. This one is an additional way to score at the end of the game, helping to boost your victory point engine, whereas this one allows you to scorch any empty forest space when you place in a summer forest, meaning when you scorch, you're using these flame tokens to essentially block out spaces on the game map, meaning that other players can't use that space when they want to place their dice. So it kind of essentially restricts the amount of dice that can be played on a particular forest card, which can be quite brutal. So the extra abilities in these games helps you to pick a play style and build an engine around how your dice system and resource gathering economic system is going to work. Brew has a very interesting art style where the characters look like they have like no whites in their eyes or really dilated pupils. It's kind of intriguing but creepy at the same time, but I actually really love the art style, and I think this is one of the things that draws me to the game. The fact that players are going to be using dice to claim and trigger different elemental resources that they can take into their supply, which they then translate them into particular potions that give players abilities to alter the course of how the dice are going to be played, is one that I really enjoy. I like games that have little triggers that kind of chain together and play out. Now, the area control aspect of Brew is a little bit cutthroat. There might be a card that you're going for and you're planning 2 or 3 turns ahead and you're looking at your dice and seeing how you're going to use them, and just at the last minute the other players nab that straight from you, meaning that you end up with not many points at the end of that round. That can feel a little bit frustrating, especially when you've put so much thought into how you're setting up your turn, but I actually think it is what makes this game so intriguing. The fact that you are battling it out for the forest, you are fighting with your combos against the other players to try and synergize and take up as much of the land as possible. Like, I would prefer to play Brew at the 2-player level because it's a little bit more back and forth. At the 3 or 4 player level, there can be a situation where 2 or 3 players might vie for the same land, and it can get a little bit too cutthroat because 2 players might just quickly play a card that allows them to remove a die or scorch a forest and just block out all the spaces that you potentially might need. Thank you everyone for joining me for my first top 3 list of the month, and I look forward to bringing you top 3 lists once a month from now on. And if you really like my videos, please don't forget to subscribe, comment in the comments below about what you thought about the 3 games that I showcased this month. Have you played those games? Or are you looking to get those games? What are your thoughts? I'd like to engage and also chat with you in the comments below and talk about some of the games that you saw in this video. If you really like Board Game Sanctuary and my videos, please consider heading over to my Facebook page and liking us on Facebook to get all of the most recent board game news and updates that come from this channel. As well as that, if you'd like to extend and become a board game sanctuarian, don't forget to head over to Patreon and support us on Patreon. I would greatly appreciate it. Otherwise, this is Danny signing out. Don't forget to make sure your next game is an amazing one. Goodbye. Okay, yeah, I'll return the chili for the curry for the dinner tonight. I was just using it in this video.